The other thing that I really notice is thinking about the difference between people who were in their 20s and 30s, let's say 25 years ago, and looking at people who are in their 20s and 30s today. There's an obvious, observable difference. I talk about this expression of glowing health. You know it when you see it. You know it when you see it, but we don't see it that often in America as we used to. And this is something that you really notice when you travel to Asia, to Europe. This idea of glowing health, you see it much more frequently in other countries than in here. That would mean no vaccines, no drugs, no pasteurized dairy, no refined carbohydrates, no hydrogenated oils, concentration on natural foods and some kind of exercise and getting adjusted. The closer that you can live to this ideal, the more likely you will be to be a representative of this concept of glowing health. Try to be aware of that for the next couple weeks, that the concept of glowing health. Look for it and notice it and try to pay attention. How frequently do I really see this? And if you can compare that to your perceptions, your remembered perceptions of 20 years ago, how frequently did you used to see it back then? It's something that is changing empirically, in my opinion. Okay, there's a guy. As you study the field of holistic nutrition, especially if you have any ideas about becoming a source of information and giving advice to people in this area, there are a few books that I regard as primers in this area, fundamental works, elementary works. They're usually very simply written books. They're not that long. One of them would certainly be Toxemia Explained by J.H. Tilden, M.D., written in 1926. Toxemia Explained, J.H. Tilden, 1926. You can get a used version off eBay for less than $5, I'm sure. But it's a great book. But I quote J.H. Tilden a lot. Here's a quote from J.H. Tilden. People are so saturated with the idea that disease must be fought to a finish that they're not satisfied with conservative treatment. Something must be done, even if they pay for it with their lives. This willingness to die on the altar of medicine is one reason why no fundamental improvement is made in medical science. I'll give you an example. My friend, one of my best friends, has a little baby. He just turned one year old, right? And so, amazingly, they did not vaccinate this child, and he's in perfect health. Do you guys know what roseola is? Okay, so which is a common disease of childhood, right? So he broke out with roseola, the rash, the redness, and the spots, and so he's uncomfortable, has a little fever. So they decide to take him to the pediatrician. Now, I always say, if you're out in the jungle and you see this big cave and it has a sign above it and it says lion's den, and you walk into the cave, expect to see the lion there. Okay, so this is my metaphor for what did they expect. So of course, you know, they're freaking out. They're talking about anti-inflammatories. They're talking about drugs. They're talking about, this is the time. Now he really needs to be vaccinated because, you know, if he's got this, the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, is soon to follow. Yeah, I mean, that really makes a lot of sense. Right now, he's slightly immune suppressed. So at the time when the kid who is struggling into some rudimentary formation of his immune system, right? At the time when he is slightly immune suppressed, let's give him 3 definitely immunosuppressive injections. Let's do that. It's a really good idea. Something must be done. Something must be done. So I always like to compare this idea with the emergence of the immune system in the little child. Children are born tabula rasa, clean slate. No child is born with an intact immune system. No child is born with an intact immune system. That immune system is struggling into a rudimentary level in the first 2 years of life. We have evolved in the human species certain normal, mild, self-limiting, immune-building experiences of childhood: measles, mumps, rubella, rubeola, fever. You want your child to get these little illnesses, these temporary little illnesses. That's how they're building their immune system. That's how the body, let's take fever for example, okay? The temperature goes up. As soon as it gets over 100, people start freaking out. Now see, the body is developing its power to create an inhospitable environment. The body is developing its power to create an inhospitable environment for certain pathogens or microbes. If it goes up to 105, he's going to get meningitis. Well, how often does that ever happen? 1 in 20 million among the most immune-suppressed neighborhoods that there are in the United States. No, there's always an economic concern behind these ideas that everybody has in health and medicine. The particular idea here is to sell anti-inflammatories. Giving Tylenol when the child has a fever, it's immunosuppressive. We are interfering with that child's ability to create his immune system, his ability to elevate his body's temperature, that power. That's part of his immune system. We must do everything to promote that. How do you promote it? You leave it alone. You let it happen. Tilden used to say, there's an old saw, feed a cold, starve a fever. Remember that? Maybe your grandmother told you that. Tilden goes, no. Tilden, Beeler, all these old guys, they said, no. It's starve a cold, starve a fever. Okay? Most of the time, the little kids have these fevers because of all the Haagen-Dazs in Choco Nuts and all the and chicken tenders that you've been giving the kid in the first place, right? If the child is not hungry, do not force food on the child who has a cold or a fever. Just make sure he's hydrated, give him juices that have vitamin C, and a little chicken broth or something if he's hungry. If he's not hungry, don't force food. He's developing his immune system. He's clearing out. He's clearing out the trash that you already gave him, which came in too fast for him to metabolize it. That's usually what's happened. So give him a chance to survive. Give him a chance to develop his immune system. By no means the worst thing is to give him more experimental remedies, drugs, pills, and potions. I just remember something. Do you guys remember now this has been like 8-10 years ago, and it was really weird. It was actually in mainstream media for a while, and then it just kind of faded away. And I never understood it. They never explained it. But the FDA, see if you remember this, the FDA came out and made a public pronouncement and they listed 50 of the most common cold remedies that everybody buys for their child at Walgreens, is like Robitussin, all these St. Joseph aspirin for children, all these anti-inflammatories, all these temporary everyday drugs. They came out and stated that they had no positive effect on the child's health, and they were no longer recommending all of those. Does anybody remember that? Okay, you do. Okay. it kind of came and went. It didn't get much attention, but that was really, I couldn't understand the thinking behind it, because the FDA is usually in the control of the pharmaceutical industry, and what they say is usually for promoting sales of all those drugs and remedies. Components of detox. So it's very simple. The primary components of detox consist, first of all, of hydration. Now, in this seminar, I don't have enough time to go through the whole water discussion. I do have a whole chapter on hydration on the website, very cleverly titled Water. And at the end of it, there's a whole section on fluoride. But in general, we are dehydrated. The water that you drink in the 5 cups of coffee every day does not count. For every cup of coffee you drink, you are losing 2 cups of metabolic water. Between 1 and 2 liters during a detoxification, between 1 and 2 liters of water is optimum. If you're not used to drinking that much water, it will take you a couple weeks to get up to that, because your body just is not used to accepting all that water. On my consult form, one of the items on that 3-page questionnaire the patient must fill out, it says, how much water do you drink every day? How much water do you drink every day? And you won't believe the answers that people write. Not much, or it'll say 1 cup. They actually say things like 5 cups of coffee or something like that, pretending like the water in the coffee will count. So many of our problems, especially chronic illnesses and chronic diseases, can be solved, if not vastly ameliorated, just by drinking some water, okay? At least 1 liter a day, and if you're detoxing, try to get that up to as close to 2 liters as possible. So read the water chapter when you get a chance. Okay, diet. As we clear out the tract, as we clear out the blood, we're only going to be adding enzyme-rich foods to nourish you during the detox program. We're going to go over that in detail. Clear the tract and clear the blood. That's the way I was trained. Now here's another one of these primers for holistic nutrition. If you're really interested in this field, here is one of your early little Bibles. It's real easy to read. Do I have it over there? You know who this guy was, right? Weston A. Price was the dentist. And in the 1930s, he and his wife went around the world for 3 years, and he was looking for what? He was looking for the healthiest people. Exactly, the healthiest people on earth. Here's how he evaluated. The healthiest people on earth were not only those who had the longest life overall, but who had the longest life pain-free with no degenerative diseases. And also they had strong bones, no evidence of osteoporosis. He looked at corpses and everything. It was a very thorough study. It's your note number 45. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Some of these slides will have a number in brackets. You go to my homepage on my website and you'll see a little button and it will say Notes Seminars. You click on that button and you scroll down to the Live Nutrition Seminar, and that's where what these notes refer to. Okay. Weston A. Price finally noticed that the people who lived the longest with the most disease-free life, they had certain characteristics in common. All throughout the world, across the world, they had characteristics in common. Here were the common characteristics. They had a mineral-rich water. Glacial milk, he talks about that. You know, if they lived in mountainous areas like Switzerland and the water was so rich with minerals that it would be milky and cloudy, not because it was polluted, it was that mineral rich. That was one characteristic. Fruits and vegetables, the concept of organic wasn't even, important at that time because they hadn't invented pesticides and herbicides yet. Okay, fruits and vegetables. Whole grains, a very important source of B vitamins as well as essential fatty acids. A little meat, fish, and raw dairy, and that's it. So you could spend all kind of money. South beats diet, North beats diet, paleo diet, this diet, that diet. I just saved you a lot of money here. Here's the diet of the healthiest people who have ever lived on this planet. And I'm just really summarizing this. He documents this extremely well in his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Now, my opinion is that there is no legitimate program of detoxification which does not begin with the colon. This is kind of like a criterion how you can separate the professionals from the dilettantes. Now, here was a guy who really inspired me in this field. 11 years university, I graduated from without ever hearing terms like probiotics, mucoid plaque, colon disease. So that was Richard Anderson. After a few years in practice, when I first went into practice, I began to notice something. I began to notice that, wow, as these patients come in year after year, and I'm adjusting C7 and T7 every day, or every time they come in, and then they feel great, and they go out into the world and they feel great. But as time went by, year after year, they were getting bigger and sicker in spite of the spine being cleared out. And then I began to realize that there are some other influences. There may be some other influences on total health than just having a clear, adjusted spine. And so I was in my climb every mountain phase at that time. This is in the early 90s, right? And I began to read everything I possibly could on holistic nutrition at that time. I was guided into the aura and the influence of 4 of the top people in the world in individual areas of study at that time. And one of these was Richard Anderson, the naturopath, the specialist in colon detox. And we're going to talk about that specifically in a minute. I just want to introduce all my early influences. The next guy was Dr. Stan Bynum. The head of the National Enzyme Company back in the 20s was a guy named Edward Howell, MD. I have his book over there. We're going to talk about that as well. He had a vice president of National Enzyme Company, Dr. Stan Bynum, PhD, and when Edward Howell died in 1988, Bynum took over National Enzyme Company, and he ran that until just for a few years, and then he founded his own company in Phoenix, Arizona called Infinity. Now, this was the top expert in enzyme nutrition in the world, was Stan Bynum. The story of how I was introduced to Bynum in Phoenix, Arizona, that's a whole complicated story, but I'll just tell you that I became aware of bioterrain analysis, live cell testing. Does everybody know what that means? I took that course. in bioterrain analysis with Stan Bynum in the mid-90s. And that was in Phoenix. And it was all medical doctors and me in this room, pricking your finger, getting a drop of blood, looking at your blood on the microscope. We just did that, identifying the common imbalances in human blood. And then I was really intrigued by this. I went with Bynum on several occasions. We traveled to the Philippines and to Asia, and we did hundreds of live cell tests in the third world. And we saw, you know what I learned? I learned what the word stress really means in the third world. Stress does not mean your mother-in-law is coming over for the weekend. Stress means you live your life hovering between life and death. That's stress. And people who live like that, their blood has a certain look to it. It looks like hell. It looks really bad. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. So anyway, Bynum taught me so much. He taught me to think at the cellular level, especially when it comes to supplementation, when it comes to nutrition. The concept of bioavailability. How much of your food is actually being broken down, digested, and actually getting to your cells? Every cell of your body has requirements, just a couple requirements every second of your life, from the moment of birth to the moment of death. What are they? To take in oxygen and nutrients and to expel wastes. To the degree to which the cells of your body are allowed to perform these two functions, you will be healthy. And so that was Bynum who inculcated that idea, and that is directly coming from Edward Howell. So we'll talk more about Bynum in a minute here. Does anybody know who this handsome gentleman is? Okay, this is Patrick Flanagan, wonderkind of antioxidants. This is a whole long story too, but I'll just tell you, he invented an antioxidant which has no peer in the world today. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a little while. And finally, this is Kem Shahani, PhD. He was the #1 expert in probiotics and flora in the world. He was the head of University of Nebraska department, published many times in JAMA and top medical journals. But he taught me about not only the importance, the critical importance of flora, but how they work in the body and why most Americans are deficient in flora and what that really means from an epidemiological standpoint. Okay, the detox program itself, which is extremely simple, it consists of a common sense diet, which we've already talked about, and 7 supplements. Now, each one of these supplements has a long story. Each one of these stories is delineated in a separate chapter on my website under chapters. The 60-day program, as I said, consists of this simple, common sense diet and then 7 supplements. And these are the 7 supplements. Now, here's the philosophy of Bynum. Stan Bynum taught us this. As far as supplements go, number 1, 95% of the supplements that you see in GNC, in Walgreens, and in the drugstores are manufactured either indirectly or directly by whom?
Pharmaceutical.
Exactly, Dr. Wade has it. Their job is to make a beautiful label and to put the cheapest ingredients in those supplements as possible. Spend money on marketing and promotion. Outside of that, there is another category of supplements that are well made. They are valuable. They are nutritionally valid. We don't really need them on a daily basis for survival. There is another smaller category of that group which we really need for complete cellular nutrition and bioavailability, which we really need to clear the tract and clear the blood. And so Bynum always said, we want people to be spending the least amount of money possible on supplements, to be taking the least number of supplements possible, but still to enable the cells of our body to perform those 2 functions, to have a clear tract and clear arterial system all the time. That's the goal of a legitimate detox program. This is Stan Bynum coming right at you from the grave. That's exactly how he talked. Okay, the tract and the blood. The tract and the blood.